Well, good evening, everybody. Welcome once again to the Sunday Night Sports Guys. The boys and I are back for another week of sports talk. Welcome to Troy McKenzie in Cobourg, Ontario, and Troy Blades in Hammonds Plains, Nova Scotia. Gentlemen, you are experiencing a bit of the winter weather, not so much Bladesy right now, but T-Mac, how does it feel shoveling 20 centimeters of snow here in November, sir?
Thankfully, I have a big snow blower, but 2 hours of that this morning was not fun. The biggest issue is dealing with an elementary school of 500 kids who are, even though they've heard it ad nauseum, throwing snow and throwing each other down into the snow, and my office full of kids doing the same. I want to just have the recorded message and sit and listen to me rant, so I don't have to do it fresh every year. Usually, don't have to wait till end of November for that. So no, and we're going down to minus 16 tonight. So.
Wow.
No fun.
Did it melt a little bit today? Are you looking at bad freezing for tomorrow? Like road conditions going to be a bit of a factor with all that?
I think the roads are going to be okay. There wasn't the rain that Bladesy was talking about. I think it's just bitterly cold with bare, so we should be fine.
Right on. And of course, Bladesy, getting this time of the year, lobster season coming up in Nova Scotia and several other districts. A few of them have already started. But as we know, when November comes around, it's a curse to like lobster fishing and November weather. Everything just turns and goes the other way there in Nova Scotia. So you guys had a little bit of rain today, I see.
We had a lot of rain, a lot of wind. Grand Manan, I think, was supposed to open up today. That's been delayed. So, just like always, seems like lately everything's being delayed. Hopefully in a couple weeks when 33 and 34 open up, hopefully they're on time for a change, seems like lately. But so no, it was pretty bad, but it was 16 degrees, so a lot better than what T-Mac had, that's for sure. Didn't have to shovel it, just had to wade through it. But apparently it's going to get down to freezing overnight, so we might have to skate to work tomorrow. We'll see.
Right on. Well, for those of you who might be viewing that live out here in the West where I am, I'm from Nova Scotia originally and whatnot, and so what Bladesy's talking about is the seasons that open back home for the lobster fishery, those great crustaceans that you all get at the local stores and stuff here. And one of the things, it's getting to be to the point, Troy, that we almost could have a line on the lobster season. Over, under, is it going to start on time? Is it going to be a day, 2 days? I mean, there's actually a little income source you and I should be thinking about here, buddy.
Yeah, I think so. But man, like I said, it hasn't happened lately. And then this year, of course, it's going to open. What is it, 25th or something? Which is probably the earliest it can open. I guess 24th is the earliest it can open. Yeah. So sometimes they're not in any big hurry to get out there when that's the case. But
right on.
I don't know. It seems like people are chomping at the bit. Let's hope get out there and get something, make some money for some people.
Right on. And even after being out here now close to 7 years. When that Monday comes, I don't know. I guess once you've done that long enough, it doesn't leave you. And it's definitely a big day back home. And obviously, a lot of stress and concern and things for the boys back there. So just a little shout out for the guys back home lobstering and a little insight for some of the people out here. All right, gentlemen, let's get into the show tonight. Lots to be talking about. And as we always like to start off this time of the year, we're going to bring up everything for week number 10 of the National Football League is in the books, and we are starting to turn the corner on the other side of the schedule towards the playoffs this year. And for most of you tonight, you're probably going to get the least amount of Patriots talk yet in a show, but these two guys and me get together. We don't make no promises, but we'll do our best. So as we like to address the NFL, we do our power rankings each week, talk about the top 5 teams that we have all selected. And in the course of doing that, we get to cover pretty much the more substantial things within the league. And if we feel there's other stories and things that we need to cover, we will definitely do that towards the end. So we're just going to bring up the 3 of us here and what we have selected. So usually we like to start at number 5 and work towards the drum roll of number 1. So, gentlemen, I have the Saints for T-Mac. Bladesy, you've took the Green Bay Packers. And these guys didn't know what my top 5 was. They have to submit it to me each Monday or Tuesday, depending on what the Monday nighter is. And so we bring up each guy's one. I have the Niners at number 5 this week, but I'm going to let T-Mac start this week He went with the Saints. The Saints, obviously, with a disappointing loss at home against the Atlanta Falcons. T-Mac, I'll guarantee you didn't see this one coming this week.
No, I don't think anybody did, and I just need to let people know that the Winnipeg Blue Bombers were my number 5 pick because after I did my first 4, I couldn't decide on anything. But I'm willing to give Drew Brees and company the mulligan on this one. Felt good I felt good for the Falcons, that I think should be a better team than they are, and Dan Quinn may have saved himself for a few more games, but I think the Saints are too good. The Alvin Kamara thing is confusing for me with New Orleans. If he's back and healthy, I think they have to ride him, and it was just an odd game. So if they can show that it was a blip and get back to the team they were before, I still think they've got a defense that they've never had and a great offense. And I can't stand the Packers, so any excuse not to pick them was fine. So Blazy will explain why he likes the Packers at 5.
Well, Blazy, it seems like as we now know, we don't have any undefeated teams, and that we'll get more into that as we get further to number 1. But the big dogs that we've been labeling as the top 5, they each have now had a blip on the screen, as T-Mac likes to call it, and the Packers got a nice win against Carolina. I don't know about you, but Carolina's not a team you would take lightly. That's not an automatic win there. I know with Newton out and all that thing, Kyle Allen he's not Cam Newton, but that's still a pretty stout defense they have, and they got one of the best running backs in the game, and the Packers came out of it. What is it about Green Bay that you felt they deserved that 5th spot?
Well, we talked a little bit before Monday night, and if things had gone differently last night, things would have changed, obviously. And the Saints and Packers were close there for me. The Saints were my number 1. They've been my number 1, number 2 all year, and I just could not, after that dismal performance at home against the Falcons that had been. Obviously the Falcons aren't playing up to snuff. They're not playing to their potential, of course. But just to go out there and kick 3 field goals against the Atlanta Falcons, if there was any way possible to get them out of that top 5, you know what? That's what they deserved, as far as I'm concerned. And it was close for me, but the Packers are 8-2.
Yep.
I almost had them up a little bit farther, actually. But with what happened last night, I had to keep the Packers down. They just don't have. They got, like you said, Carolina's pretty good, but they don't have that big win, that Seattle has now. That San Francisco doesn't really have it, but they've only got 1 loss. I think that's mostly it, and that's why I put them down to number 5, and Saints are 5B, I would say.
Okay.
But can I, we're not going to talk a whole lot about the Patriots, but can I say again, if Tom Brady had to come out there just on Sunday and did what Drew Brees did on Sunday, they would be calling for his head, that he was too old. Can we? Is that the truth, or is that the truth? We all know that's the truth. Everybody's like, Drew Brees, he had a bad game. Come on. He had a bad game, yes, but he was out and they went 5-0. So I don't know. This Saints team's kind of crazy to me. It's a weird thing, but I'm sure he'll turn around. I'm with Mac. I'm sure he'll turn around, but for this week, he deserves to go to number 6.
Okay. Well, Blazy, we all know it's only greatness that gets slapped around and stuff. So Drew Brees is Drew Brees, and he deserves many accolades, but he's not Brady material. So until Brady goes, Drew Brees is going to be okay. He doesn't have to worry about taking the slack. I took the Niners, and this is after having them number 1 last week. And I felt, when they were 7-0, once the Patriots endured that loss last week against Baltimore, it was fitting to put San Francisco up there for that week. Last night's game, as good as it was overall, I think we all agree, or especially Bladesy and I, because I think we saw more of the first half than T-Mac did. The first half was a little bit lackluster in ways, very good defensively if you're a defensive guy. But in the second half, things picked up more on the offensive end. Last week, part of my reason for putting the Niners at number 1 was Garoppolo had a great game. They finally had that numbers game that I think, they'd been waiting on him to have. to really justify the trade that they obviously made with New England 2 years ago. Last night was Garoppolo's opportunity to take yet another step in his progression of coming out from Tom Brady's shadow, so to speak, if you know what I mean. I don't think his game was overall terrible, but there were some drop passes, that affected his numbers and stuff like that. I'd also point out that he did put them in position for the tie. He made that drive enough to get them into field goal range to tie the game towards the end there. And he also got them in position for a 47-yard attempt by the kid they picked off the street at a local Denny's or something, as far as I know, in San Francisco. Got him in position for that. And as we know how that went last night, on his fourth attempt, he didn't make it. So I think you got to give Garoppolo some props there. Take away the fact also that George Kittle wasn't in the lineup last night, and then Sanders gets hurt early on. But guess what? Injuries are part of the game, and everybody endures them. And I would say this, with regards to the importance of the tight end in some of these offenses is pretty huge. And we are obviously witnessing that with Brady in New England. Not that Brady's having a horrible season, but we all know when Gronk's been in the lineup and part of that team, it makes a huge difference to him in terms of his confidence and stuff throwing and whatnot. To me, I just felt San Francisco, even though it was a close game with Seattle, they could have won. They had a chance to win that game. Compared to the other four, and Bladesy, I keep kind of thinking on what you've been illustrating or talking about in the last few weeks, is the fact of if we were playing on a neutral field this week, who of these teams, whether it's the 2 or 3, however you want to compare, of the 5, who would have the least chance of winning against the other 4 teams? And I think right now San Francisco would be the one out of those 5. And again, you could use the Saints. I don't have the Saints in my top 5 at all this week either. Kind of a 5B sort of thing. So that's a bit of my reasoning for that. So number 5 is in the books. We shall take these ones down. Gentlemen, we get to pick number 4. You two kind of went the same way on this one. You both went San Francisco at number 4. I chose to go with the Packers. Maybe our reasoning is similar, but Bladesy, I'll let you start this time. You put the Niners there. What did you see maybe differently that I saw?
Yeah, well, like you said, Duke, Garoppolo didn't have the greatest game last night. He had a good game, and their defense is just unreal. They shut down Russell Wilson for much of that the whole first half, and then, a lot of the second half, and then Russell Wilson did Russell Wilson things and hauled her out kind of thing. But like you said, with Garoppolo, Kittle is his number 1 receiver. He's out. You've already mentioned that, and it's crazy how important that guy is. Sanders, I think if he'd have stayed in there, man, it would have been a different game, to be honest. He was already making some nice catches, and then gets hurt. So, and they don't have a lot of depth. That's why they went and got Sanders to start with. That was kind of their Achilles heel to start with, was their receivers. So, their 2 top receivers out, that makes it tough. No excuses. Like I said, you gotta go ahead. But you know what? They've lost the 1 game, which is against the team that I have ranked ahead of them, even though they are behind them in the division. Mm-hmm. They haven't had a tough schedule, similar to what the Patriots have done. I understand that they haven't had a tough schedule, but they are still 8-1. So I'm going to give them the benefit of the doubt. If they'd got beat by Atlanta, they would have been out. But, they got beat by Seattle. They went right to the wire. And so that's why I just put them a little bit ahead of Green Bay.
Okay. So, T-Mac, had that game not been as close last night, 27-24, OT, obviously they had their opportunity to be able to win it. If that game had been a bit more of we'll call it somewhat blowout by Seattle, would that have caused you to drop the Niners out, or do you feel good about keeping them in the top 5 this week?
No, I'm good. I think with the Niners, the Packers, the Saints, each of them has certain flaws, certain things that you could point at. And to me, like, Seattle's a battle-tested team, even though we talked that their defense isn't the same as it used to be. Just to hang in there with them, I think, was fun. Even being blown out, for Garoppolo, for some of these young players, and this is the first crack of games that really matter for them. So to me, it's like San Francisco, Seattle, the winner was kind of going to be in this spot 3-4 for me. So they lost Seattle gets the third spot. The
So,
two AFC teams
right on.
take care of the rest.
Good stuff. I'll tell you another guy that impressed me with the Niners last night was the kid. I don't know his first name. Bourne, was it the wide receiver Bourne? There,
Yeah,
he was. Man, he had a little bit of a bulldog in him there last night. You notice that?
he can dance. That guy can dance.
Yes, dude.
He likes to dance.
No,
But yeah, no, he's not bad. Yeah, he's not bad at all.
Yeah.
But he's good for a third receiver, not a number one. So Deebo Samuel had a great game last night for a rookie, right?
Another guy. Yep.
I mean, but those rookie wide receivers, sometimes takes them a while to get with the program, kind of thing. But no.
Yeah, it's definitely, wide receivers definitely probably the hardest position in football for, young guys coming into the game and things like that. So, but it's good to see some scrappiness out of them guys, making up for a little bit of lack of maybe skill set just yet that they need to develop. But I like that. I'd like to see that. And like, he kind of reminded me a little bit of Edelman. Edelman's pretty scrappy and stuff like this. Only this kid's a bit taller and things, I do believe. All right, gentlemen, we're going to move up, or the Packers. I have the Packers at number 4 because I do think they're better than the Niners right now. I think if they played all things being equal, you're putting Aaron Rodgers against Jimmy Garoppolo. Who are you going with your money on? And I think at this point I would have to say I would be going with Rodgers, as much as it pains me to do that. But putting all bias aside, Green Bay's got they're a pretty good package themselves. They can run the ball, they can play defense, and they got a guy that's won a Super Bowl and knows how to get things done. So can't really take Green Bay too lightly. And as we've all said, the NFC is definitely going to be a tough one to get out of. All right, so pick number 3. Go ahead.
Sorry, Duke. Let's just not forget how bad the Packers looked 2 weeks ago against the Chargers.
True. Good point.
Like when we're talking about the Saints against the Falcons, the Packers, I think, looked even worse against the Chargers in a home field game in California. So I think that was going. I meant to say that earlier, but that's something that makes me question the Packers. That should have been a game that they just rolled and they didn't. So
right on. Fair enough. At pick number 3, you two opted to go with the Seahawks, obviously over the Niners, though they have one more loss than the Niners do. I have picked the Patriots at number 3, and I pick them at number 3 again based on that assumption, all things being equal, neutral field. Who could the Patriots be beating? I believe they could beat the Packers. I believe they could beat the Niners. I am not convinced after what I saw last week in the Baltimore game, and that's all we have to go off of is just right to the moment, right? We can assume what we think is going to happen down the road. Obviously, the Patriots' history of turning things around midseason after circumstances that they've had is well documented, and the three of us thoroughly expect that they're going to overcome what happened last week. But for the sake of this discussion and doing the power rankings, I don't know if I really honestly can't say to myself they could beat Seattle or they could beat Baltimore in those games. So until they show me something, which I expect they will this coming weekend, and I think, is that the Sunday nighter that they're playing Philadelphia?
No, 5 o'clock game or 2 o'clock your time.
2 o'clock game.
Yeah.
Okay, all right. I thought it was the Sunday night one and stuff. So,
no.
So that's why I kind of opted to bump the Patriots down to there. They didn't play this week, obviously, so they really couldn't affect much of their destiny with that. But I do expect my ranking to change different next week once that game with Philadelphia is done. So, T-Mac, you went with Seattle at number 3. What was your thinking behind putting them there particularly?
Well, they beat the Niners, so that was kind of like one of my guiding principles, the same as that I put the Ravens ahead of the Pats for that.
Yeah.
Solid team. I think the only pushback I'd give you a little bit on yours, Duke, is and I like Russell Wilson. He's great, but Lamar Jackson, like he could rush for 1,200 yards.
Wow.
He's a different, like Wilson can scramble. Mahomes can scramble. Lamar Jackson's lethal as a runner. Like, he just does things that we haven't seen since Michael Vick. And he seems to avoid the carnage that comes with, at least to this point. Now, that's only as good until the next time he gets totally flattened and we're all ripping it. But Seattle's really strong. The defense to me is good. I think the difference between when you're saying putting the Pats and the Seahawks, because I assume you've got the Seahawks at 2. I'm still riding high on the Pats defense and Belichick and company figuring things out on offense. If that offensive line can somehow we get Isaiah, I mean, I'm a broken record on that, so I won't repeat it. But that's why I kept Seattle there and underneath the 2 AFC teams.
Okay. All right, Blazy, you went with Seattle as well. Anything more you want to add from what T-Mac said there?
No, same thing. I mean, they just beat San Francisco in San Francisco, so I had to, even though it was one more loss, I had to put them over that. They were close enough that they had to jump. Their 2 losses are Ravens and Saints, which are pretty strong losses right there. Yeah. So that's why they're at 3. Why they're no higher? I don't think Seattle has the defense that people seem to think they used to have.
Right.
I mean, they had a pretty good game last night. I don't know how much of that is because of Garoppolo and receivers getting hurt. But I mean, Clowney had an awesome game last night. If he keeps playing like that, things will change. But but Russell Wilson is probably him and Jackson are the 2 front runners for MVP of the league, and he just puts that team on his back. I just don't think their receiving core is not the greatest. And then last night Lockett got hurt at the end, and I think it's pretty substantial injury from what I hear.
Yeah.
He's their number 1. I mean, Josh Gordon didn't have a target. Then he came in there in the last 3 minutes and had a big catch for a first down, and then had another nice catch in overtime. So, but I mean, as far as getting him up to speed and trying to put him in there, I mean, if Lockett's hurt for any amount of time, Seattle's going to be in big trouble. DK Metcalf, he's had a great year, but he made a stupid rookie mistake at the end of that first half, trying to get that extra yard down by the end zone with a minute left, and fumbled the ball and could have cost them the game right there. I don't know. I'll have to see more. I would be happy for the Patriots to play Seattle in the Super Bowl this year.
Okay.
From what I see, so that's why.
Sounds good. Sounds good, gentlemen. All right, moving along. We're at number 2. Mac, you went with the Patriots. Blazy, you went with the Ravens. I went with the Seahawks. Blazy, why'd you take the Ravens at number 2 on this one?
Well, the reason I put them ahead of all those NFC teams is because, they've been playing better than anybody.
Yep.
To be honest with you.
Yep.
So that's why they're ahead of Seattle and all of those. Now, why they're still number 2 and not number 1, even though they beat the Patriots the last time we saw these teams play. Number 1, that was in Baltimore. Okay. So, I always say, neutral field kind of thing, that was home field advantage. I really believe that the Patriots are still a better team than they are. I really believe that, even though Lamar Jackson had his way with them, I believe that I think Belichick will be more, will be ready again in January.
Right.
And I don't think they threw the whole playbook at him. I really don't. And we'll see what happens in January. So we'll let them have their fun and they beat the Patriots. But for now, I had the Patriots ahead of them by 1 going into this week. Patriots didn't play, and just because they beat the Bengals is not enough for me to put them ahead. Mm-hmm. So they'll have to do it again.
Sounds good. Sounds good. So Mac, you have the Patriots at number 2. Blazy says that Baltimore didn't show enough against Cincinnati. Did they show you enough? 49 points, even though it is Cincinnati. That's still another pretty good offensive output. I think they're like 1 or 2 overall offensively in the NFL. What was your reasoning with number 2 with going with the Ravens? Number 2 with the Pats. Number 2 with the Pats.
Yeah. Well, it's the same. I continued with last week. I agree with everything Troy said. I think part of it for me as a Pats fan is if there was one team, like I think of playing the Steelers in the playoffs, and I always feel like, yeah, we got this. Mm-hmm. And playing the Ravens, there have just been some tough losses, some things that I think I just have that. Maybe it's just like I won't get some bad karma now for particular. I don't know what it is, but I'm hope that I can't get the offensive line out of my head. everything that's wrong with the offense, to me, I'm pinning on the offensive line. And Dante Scarnecchia, like, I don't know if he's got a $10 million signing bonus for him for an 80-year-old coach, or however 100-year-old, however old he is. But if they can get this figured out, I'm right there with Bladesy. Home field, neutral field, whatever. Like give Tom some time to do the stuff. Our defense matches up. They'll figure out some things. So, but until then, God, on a neutral field right now with that line, I just don't know if we can score enough. We'd be counting on the defense to just be almost perfect, and that's even with the wrinkles I know that they throw at him the next time. I'm not gonna, and I just have this Baltimore Raven voodoo doll in my head, like bad things happen when we put and we do, I don't know what our kicker is. Like the years of having good Vinatieri, good Gostowski, Nick Folk, Nugent, whoever the next guy is in 2 weeks. We'll see.
Well, that's one of the things, and like I told everybody, I didn't promise we wouldn't have some Patriot talk even in an off week. But Bladesy, how much do you think this is affecting Belichick and how he prepares and things like that? Because I mean, I was watching clips the other night of highlights from last year's Super Bowl, and he's having a discussion with the referee, asking him about the dome, the top of the dome. Is that thing going to be closed by kickoff and all that? I mean, he takes everything to the finite detail.
Yeah.
How much do you think this kicker thing's keeping him awake at night?
I don't think it's good. I mean, he hasn't had to worry about it for 20 years, right?
Right.
You know, between Vinatieri and Gostkowski, he hasn't had to worry about a kicker. Whereas, I mean, as we saw last night, kicker's pretty important, especially nowadays. I mean, right now, these extra points going back has really changed the game a lot. You know, there's a lot more extra points getting missed, and I mean, those things are huge. But yeah, I mean, I'm sure it is, but I don't think how much can you worry about a kicker? You either pick one up, you sign one, or you keep what you have. There ain't no coaching a kicker. There's nothing you can do, really. So I think he's more worried about the offensive line, and he's more worried about, maybe getting hopefully N'Keal Harry up to snuff, because we do need another receiver for sure.
Yeah.
And hopefully over this bye week they have ran some drills for that guy. And hopefully he's going to be back. I don't know. I haven't heard anything. I assume he's going to be back for the Philadelphia game.
Mm-hmm.
But we got, obviously there's four big games coming up. Everybody says about how easy schedule we've had, and we have, but 4 big games coming up. At Philly coming up this week is huge. I don't really believe Philadelphia is a great team. I do believe they should be able to beat them. They can win that, and then they got the Cowboys at home. They're kind of on a roll there, and then they've got 2 real big AFC games, obviously, with Houston and Kansas City coming up after that, which are more important. But they got to take care of business. And I'm with Mac, man. There's no way I want to go into Baltimore for that AFC Championship game. So
no,
we got to keep. They got a 1-game lead over Baltimore for number 1, but obviously Baltimore has the tiebreaker on them now. So need to keep a lead there, and that's what they should be focused on. I'm sure they are, because they normally are when it comes to November and December.
Right. Well, I went with Seattle at number 2 again. Saying off of what I said with the Patriots at number 3, that I felt Seattle and Baltimore were better. Right now, I think I go Seattle number 2, and a lot has to do with the MVP race that seems to be kind of narrowing down to 2 guys right at the moment, Lamar Jackson and Russell Wilson. Wilson, I give him lots of credit for last night, man. He played really, really well. He had some great play, especially in that second half, which became more offensive than the first and things. I think right now Jackson still has that edge. He's got the edge in the voting if it was to end today, and hence that's kind of why I'm taking Seattle there. Last night Jadeveon Clowney had probably one of his best games, probably the best game I've seen him play as a professional, be honest with you. He was everywhere last night, and I'll guarantee you he was as good as Wilson made things for Seattle on offense. Clowney was the difference maker last night on defense. So Seattle definitely got their money's worth for what they paid for him last night. So number 1, and we'll just keep right into the roll here, because it seems like we're just kind of interchanging some things, the 3 of us. Max got the Ravens at number 1. Blazy's got the Pats at number 1, and I have the Ravens. So just if you guys want to kind of just touch a little bit more on that, Bladesy, Pat's number one. You brought him back up from last week. I was a little
I brought him back.
surprised.
Like I said, I mean, hey, I had him down to 3. Not my fault.
And they don't play,
Not
and
my
you bump
fault.
them
The
up to
Saints
one. How do
freaking
you do
everybody
that?
lost. Not my fault. They all lost and lost terribly, for crying out loud. But Duke, I do have to say, so unfortunately, I've got this freshly laundered Brady jersey that I wear every Sunday when they're playing during the season. And I don't wash the goddamn thing until they lose. So obviously, it's freshly laundered right now. I don't want to have to wash it again until the middle of February.
Well, I'm sure Amber's glad it's just the jersey and not your underwear. So good for you.
Yeah, no. Oh man, I wouldn't do that.
Mac, you chose to go with the Ravens, and I went with the Ravens as well. I don't know about you, but right as of today, I don't see how anybody else beats them in one, for one game to win it all at this point. They got everything rolling. Wouldn't you agree?
I agree. They get everything rolling. I think there's teams that can beat them. So, like, the rankings is because we have to pick one, but it's still like Lamar Jackson still isn't tested.
Mm-hmm.
So who knows when the different schemes and stuff get dialed up? But he's a special athlete, and the fact that they passed up on him at 25 when they could have picked the tight end, and then traded back into the first round to pick Lamar Jackson.
Yeah.
I can only think of the teams that, like, even Baltimore can't say, yeah, he's like, you would have picked him at 25 if you thought he was going to be this good. So something fell into
right there.
Yep.
I was very, very disappointed the Patriots did not pick him at 32 last year. Not gonna lie. I thought he would, although maybe he wouldn't have stuck around until Brady turned 50 and when he's going to retire. But I thought that he was pretty good. I thought it would have been a nice guy to back up Brady for the next couple of years until he goes off into the sunset. But anyway, carry on.
There was plenty of noise about that too.
Yeah.
There were people within the organization that thought that he was being considered. So.
Yeah. So who was it that who did they opt to take instead of Jackson at that point?
Patriots? They traded.
They traded out of it.
That was the Patriots pick that Baltimore traded with them.
Yeah.
It was 32 when
We're not going to bring that up though.
No. That's okay. Yeah, everybody said the Patriots made a mistake when they traded Garoppolo too. We've got 2 Super Bowl wins since then, so let's not get carried away.
Well, he's going to be.
Baltimore's got they got a couple tough games coming up. Houston at the Rams,
San Francisco, and at Buffalo. And Buffalo is always tough. I mean, there was another team this weekend. I thought, if they could have pulled off that win, Buffalo was in Cleveland, a very beatable Cleveland team. I think going even in Cleveland, and had they have won that game, they would have kept a little bit of pressure on the Patriots. I mean, they would have kept it with 2 losses. So, I mean, I don't think anybody's getting over the top and thinking Buffalo is going to win the division this year, but would have made it something to keep watch of for sure and stuff.
Well, that's the thing. I mean, Patriots on a bye, like you said, you didn't want to talk about them, but they were a big winner this year, sitting out. I mean, or this week. I mean, Baltimore was the only team close to them that won.
Yeah.
Kansas City lost, Buffalo lost. So kind of made a little bit of breathing room. So. Yeah, that's where it goes.
Okay, gentlemen, that concludes our power rankings for Week 10 of the National Football League. We are going to, let me scroll back here, take that one. Still catching on to all of this. So one of the questions that I proposed to you guys was, as we all know, in hockey this year, the Stanley Cup, we had St. Louis was there. We all know the story of St. Louis, how back in July they were either in last place or right around the basement there. And they make their remarkable run to, cap it off in June with their Stanley Cup Game 7 win against the Bruins. And then this summer in baseball, we had the Nationals, perhaps the only team, I think I heard, what was that stat? The only team to lose or win 15 games in their first 50. And then end up winning the World Series. So, I mean, that's 2 stories of teams coming from way behind to win championships. do we have a potential three-peat in terms of sports happening in February? Is there a team that you see could potentially play that role of the Blues and the Nats in the NFL this year? Mac, I'll let you go first.
I don't think so, but I just think those 4 or 5 teams at the top are just too strong, barring some catastrophic injury.
Yeah.
But if I did have to make a pick, I like the Raiders. And it's interesting because I was happy to poke holes in Gruden and why he shouldn't have left the booth. But they may be building something there. They've got a tight end that I'd like to have Waller on our Pats team.
Yep.
Jacobs looks like a stud at running back. They gave up Cooper and still have okay receivers, and they're building something on defense too. So they have to play Kansas City, obviously, and beat Kansas City. But I'm intrigued by them, and we'll have to see how it turns out. But if I don't think so. I just think that it's top heavy this year in the NFL. But if there was one team, I'd pick the Raiders.
Yeah, that would probably be the game that stands out more so. The Kansas City game at KC. They're home to Chargers and the Bengals the next 2 weeks. They're at the Jets, so those are 3 very winnable games. Then it's the KC game, but you know what? KC's not a lock anymore. Regardless of what you want to say, Mahomes, I don't know if you can say he's 100%, but in KC, I would definitely be inclined to vote to bet on Oakland. Home against Tennessee. Blazy, is that a team you're looking at for this question? Are they a potential to maybe pull that kind of an upset?
Yeah, well, it's funny because when we did our little, rankings or whatever, our records at the start of this thing, I had Tennessee winning 1 game. And obviously that's a little bit far fetched, but you know what? They've got something going on there. Mike Vrabel, I don't know if he's a great coach as far as X's and O's and things like that, but you know what? He's part of that Patriot tree, and he's got something going on there. He made the move to put Tannehill in there instead of Mariota, and I think it is paying dividends. That was a huge, huge win for them the other day against Kansas City. A game they should never have won. No matter, Mahomes played. I couldn't tell if he was hurt or not. I think he played just as well. Obviously, he threw for 400 yards. Yeah. But Tannehill just seems like Derrick Henry is a beast. Nobody can stop that guy. You're talking about Kansas City's defense, but I don't care what defense you got. Yeah. You're not stopping him when he's on a roll. I do believe Tennessee could be that team. I thought the Colts might have been, I guess they weren't really they actually started off good, but, with Brissett hurt, in the big loss against Miami, I would say. The other one I would say real dark horse, which one of the teams that I thought was going to do well this year and really haven't is the LA Chargers. I mean, obviously 4-6, and that loss against Oakland Thursday could have put the nail in the coffin. They pretty much got to run the table, and they still got 2 games against Kansas City coming up. Yeah. But I wouldn't put it past them to make a run here. They've done it before. They've started out at 0-4, I think, in a couple times, and actually, in a run at the playoffs. So I still wouldn't bury them, but obviously, they're going to have to run the table. But if you're looking at a dark horse, I'm same as Mac. I mean, I don't think any of these teams really got a chance to knock out the couple big boys, but if you had to pick one, let's go Tennessee.
Yeah, I just one comment on the Chargers. It's so sad the situation they're in as a team. Like, we talk about neutral site and home field and stuff. Like, that game against Green Bay was 70% Packers fans. It's I don't know how the NFL would have done it differently, but it's almost a blight on the league that we've got this professional football team that has no home field. They're going to Mexico this week. It was probably ridiculous, but the story that why don't they just go and play their games in England? It's they've got to get that fixed because it's just wrong.
Mm-hmm. I don't even know what was the whole reasoning for leaving San Diego. Was it stadium issues, or because every time you watch a game in San Diego, that thing's generally packed out.
Yeah, I think he wanted a new stadium. They wouldn't build him one, or whatever it was. Same old deal. He they called his bluff. I would say, something like that. So,
yeah.
And now now LA has two teams that really they don't really want, but if they want one of them, it's the Rams. They've got history, obviously.
Yeah.
So it's
that's going to be interesting to see if it turns into a Jets Giants thing where they truly do have two fan bases.
right.
If they can pull that off, then they'll have the home field again, and sharing the place won't matter.
Well, it's certainly got the population for it, but I
Yeah.
mean, LA is not New York, obviously,
No.
and I mean, they do have some passionate fans, but it's different than the East Coast, and there's a lot more stuff to do out there. Football's lower on the list for sure.
For sure,
Yeah, there's a lot of competition for sports dollars in LA, and not everybody is making multi-millions out there. So, yeah, definitely I agree with Mac. Definitely a situation the NFL needs to look in. Well, our fantasy sports colleague, one Lindsey Brian, will be finally kind of patting Duke on the back because Duke's going with the Pittsburgh Steelers of all teams. And as I told you guys before we came on the air, the Steelers, by the end of the schedule, do you realize could potentially be 11-5, could be 12-4 if they ran the table. Here's their schedule after getting the win against the Rams. And ain't that a sorry lot? Talk about a team that overachieved last year, or however you want to address the Rams. At Cleveland, at Cincinnati, a couple of road games. Road games are generally tougher and in your division. Where am I here? Cleveland, Cincinnati. Then back home for Cleveland, at Arizona, home to Buffalo, at the Jets, at Baltimore. Baltimore is the only what you'd call real, true challenge in those games that they have left.
And they may not be playing with it for anything at that point. They may already have the second seed wrapped up, So.
Yeah. So imagine the Pittsburgh Steelers at 12-4.
Well, that's what I had. That's what I had them at start of the year. Sorry, Mac. Sorry, Mac. I think you did too, to be honest with you. So, but I mean that would be kind of crazy, but that is a pretty easy schedule, Duke. So I think that's probably a good call. It's kind of funny. I know. I mean, hey, there's no Steeler love here. We know that. It was just making fun. But everybody, when Big Ben went down and they were 1-4 or 1-3 or whatever it was, and made the trade for Minka Fitzpatrick, everybody laughed at him and said, "What the hell are you doing?
Yeah.
Why would you trade, for this guy? Rebuild, man." And he's been unbelievable. I mean, what a game he had Sunday against the Rams.
Yeah.
And that quarterback is not the greatest, but there's a lot of not great quarterbacks out there right now.
Trent Dilfer won a Super Bowl. You do realize that.
Yeah.
I'll be very happy if Mason Rudolph comes into the Foxborough in January for the AFC Championship. I will be happy. So let's hope that happens. I'm all for the Steelers making the playoffs. I'm not gonna lie to you. I want them in there, and if they can take out the Ravens, which I don't care how good the Ravens are. They always have tough games against those guys. So you know what? That might be one of the teams that could knock them out just because they the tradition and the rivalry kind of thing. So the more teams to knock off the Ravens, the better for me.
You just want to be able to hand a hanky to Lindsay again, because I'm pretty sure you guys would be in the same room together for a Pat Steelers game. Huh?
He's got more bed Kleenex from Steelers losses against the Patriots.
You should be autographing those ones, Bladesy, with the date and everything right on it for keepsakes for him.
I don't even know. Can't say what else we can say.
Right on.
He knows who the boss is. He knows who his daddy is.
Well, anyway, everybody, this concludes our portion of the National Football League. Week 10 is in the books, and obviously we're back in the saddle with our Patriots full throttle next week. So you can get plenty of Pat's love again next week if that's what you like. But right at this moment, we are going to bid adieu to Bladesy. He not that he's not a hockey fan, but he's a seasonal hockey fan, and right now is not his season for the National Hockey League. So I've decided to try this week to spare him the agony of pretending like he knows what he's talking about. Not that he couldn't handle it, because he always does a good job. But we're going to let him kind of fade off into the sunset for tonight. And Mac and I is going to take it from here for the hockey portion. So, Blazy, have a great rest of the evening. And we'll see you back here again next week, buddy.
These boys, go Bruins!
All right, so we're going to get into the NHL, Mac, and I have set up this first part of it. Let me see. Oops. Give me a second here so I can get my NFL stuff off. There we go. I got so many things lined up right bang, 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 and then I have to go all the way back to the top and delete things off of that. So there we go. That's off here. Oh, my dear. What am I putting up there? The Montreal Canadiens logo. God help me. Anyway, I've entitled this part called Mac's Habs Report, and there he is with his Habs hat this week. Definitely a call for more hockey talk. And Mac, as you know, we have some big, stout Montreal fans out there, much like yourself. And so I thought it'd be a great opportunity for you to kind of share about last weekend. You got to go up to Montreal, some family time and things like that, but also got to stop into the Bell Center and things. So what's going on with your Montreal Canadiens? Are you happy with where things are right now? Where do you see improvement that needs to take place? Is Julian doing the job you think he should be doing? Give us your fill for the Montreal Canadiens.
Sure. So sporting the new Montreal Canadiens hat, courtesy of the practice facility that we went to see. I before I get into the Habs, I just want to tell all the hockey fans out there, if you can't get to an NHL game, or if you're in a city to watch a game and you have a chance to go to a practice, do it. We did it 4 years ago when we were in Washington and saw the Caps. And then my son and I went on Monday to Brossard, which is a suburb of Montreal, and saw the Habs practice. And there's nothing quite like a game, but to be in an arena that's you just standing above the practice and watching these guys go through a 90-minute practice is pretty sweet. And we were there. Carey Price, no word of a lie, they did not score on him in practice. Wow. The last drill they did was a 5-on-2 power play with two defensemen. They didn't score on him. Shea Weber was being teed up for slap shots, almost took Kincaid's head off. The speed, it was a really cool experience. So I don't know if it's available everywhere. I know the Leafs practices that aren't open, but if you ever go into the game and you're there a day before or something, please give that a try. It was an absolute blast. As far as the Habs, I think we're in a really nice spot. I think the Price is back being Price. The nonsense about trading him before he gets too old is just that. Like he's 30. He's fine. There's many, many good years left. Kincaid is doing what we hoped the backup goalie could do last year, and seems like a real quality guy. We have 4 lines. Another recommendation, the Bleacher Report app for your phone is a neat way to kind of pick your teams, and it aggregates the articles for you. And there was a cool story in there from the Hockey Writers website that talked about the Danault, Gallagher, Tatar line and whether it was one of the best lines in the league. Right. And if you believe in the stats, they certainly do play really well 5-on-5. It's cool what they can roll out. And with Weber back, that Subban trade looks better and better with each year that passes. He's just a monster back there that just provides so much. Petrie's an unheralded guy, and they've got some young depth, so we'll see what happens. But I'm very high on them as a team. Like the playoffs, hopefully, will be something we have. And then with Price, Weber, and balanced scoring with a power play that's even league average, I think there's lots of good chances.
Now, as we know with the Patriots, where practices and stuff is concerned, in NFL as a whole, I think we could say, but especially with Belichick, what you do in practice, your week of practice, determines everything in terms of playing time, confidence in you, number of plays you're going to get, looks, targets, the whole 9 yards. So we know that those kind of practices are pretty intense. And you're actually the first person I've talked to who sat in on an NHL practice. From what you viewed, was that practice kind of along those lines of intensity? Do you think NHL practices are intense? Do they matter in terms of how, maybe younger players get their ice time and things like that? Or was it a pretty relaxed session that you were watching?
Um, I would say it was a bit of both. They were doing this really cool high speed drill to start that had like two forwards passing it back to the two defensemen, and the forwards would immediately forecheck after making the pass, and the
Yep.
defenseman would make a pass to the other two, and there was just this constant movement thing that really was like it was way longer than I thought it would be. The goalies were just kind of watching, and that was kind of the intense part. But you knew going in that the penalty kill and the power play were issues they wanted to work with, and they worked on it hard. And they like if the penalty killers did what they were supposed to do, bang, right down another face-off, doing it. Like Suzuki's a young guy that they had talked about wanting to get him power play time, and there he was out there, and whether it was on purpose or not, but Gallagher and Domi were feeding Suzuki over and over again, giving him chances. To me, it seemed very purposeful. Thinking of the things that I read about on the Habs message boards and blogs, was exactly what they were addressing in practice.
Yep.
So Ryan Paling, the young guy who scored 3 goals to end the year,
Yep.
he was back for his first practice with the team, getting called up, and there he was killing penalties and centering the line. And I've seen Julien run a practice, and I saw Boudreau run a practice in Washington.
Okay.
Both of them were pretty intense, but they had fun out there too.
Yeah.
Like Price is a real character. When he's robbing guys, making saves, he's then chirping at them as they skate by, and so it was a neat mix of the two.
Right. And that was last Monday, wasn't it? That wasn't a game day practice, was it?
It was the day before.
Day before. Right.
They
on.
played Boston the next night.
Right on. Well, speaking of Boston, where we are, I'll take this down here. I thought I had already put this into our system here, and it's talking about the Bruins' go-ahead goal that was deemed offside, in which Charlie Coyle had scored the go-ahead goal, or it might have been the tying goal. I think it was a tying goal at the time. And so I was going to get your opinion on whether that was the right call made. But apparently the way the ruling is now, with the use of skates, you can be in across a bit as long as you have control of the puck. Now, to me, old style, when I looked at it and it did the replay, I'm like, well, that's offside, right? But the way they talked about it, the way the announcers were talking about it, and then they were flashing the camera on Cassidy, and today they have their iPads or whatever it is they're looking. He's looking at it and shaking his head and nodding and stuff like this. So how does that? If you could help me here a little bit. Have they changed that now where it's more about having full control of it? You can still be in a bit. How does that really work? You aware of that?
I haven't seen enough cases of it. I missed this one because we were traveling back from Montreal and got in late.
Okay.
On the Tuesday, so I heard the controversy the next day. What I heard more was about the length of time it took and some complaints around that. But I've seen the different calls where some of them look so blatantly, but it's like what you're describing, and other ones where the camera angle and was the puck slightly over, that type of stuff. So
Yep.
I don't know. It's kind of the scourge of, it's like the football game on Sunday with whether McCaffrey was over the goal line and we couldn't tell if he was over or not, or if we're talking about robot umpires
Yep.
in MLB. The part of my brain that wants to get things right is happy with it, and the other part of my brain would just like to we somehow enjoyed sports for all those years before we had these replays, and
Yeah.
So I'm kind of talking from both sides.
Right.
And the fact that it was the Bruins and it helped my team win, okay, who am I to question it?
Well, it was definitely a good game. I definitely would have wanted the better end of the score being on the black and gold. But anyway, while you're here, we have a viewer, because once we're done with the show tonight, I usually take it, download it, and then upload it to our YouTube channel. And there's a guy who's been following us for a bit. He always makes comments on our video. Says he loves watching our show. Michael Keevan. And I think he's in the New England area, Massachusetts or something like that, because he always seems to enjoy the Patriots conversation, the Red Sox talk that Bladesy and I do, and obviously with the Bruins and stuff. So I made it known to Michael that for 30 years I was a Montreal Canadiens fan. And he's like, how do you go from being a Montreal fan to a Bruin fan? He said, That's almost as much as being a Red Sox fan going to be a New York Yankee fan and things. And so I told him that someday I would share the story with him on it. So I think that was a great time to share that story, seeing as you and I used to be very good at tag teaming on guys years ago, Bruin fans, Leaf fans, as members of Le Bleu Blanc Rouge. The best there was, the best there is, the best there's ever been. If you remember all that lingo that we used to throw around. Michael, what happened is, if you'll recall, they've had two strikes in the NHL. The first one came out, I don't know exactly the year. I think it was 2000, 2001, something like that. It was in the early 2000s. And Montreal had struggled for a while. They last won the Cup in '93. The whole Patrick Waugh thing that went down, I think that was a little bit of a shot in the heart sort of deal, because everybody was in love with Waugh, bringing two Stanley Cups pretty well on his own back for the most part. Then the move into the Bell Center from the Montreal Forum, because as you know, we grew up with the 70s, late 70s Montreal Canadiens in the argument for greatest team of all time. Personally, I think they are, but I get the whole Oiler debate that comes into play there. But when that strike happened, Michael, it went to where they had salary cap. And I thought, you know what, now's a time, like now we don't have no excuses. Before it was kind of money and people didn't want to go to Quebec and the taxation and stuff. And some of that was still kind of in play there, but with the cap, it was a little bit more of a level playing field. Now, the other thing is I'm kind of a Don Cherry disciple in the aspect of not a big fan of Europeans coming here for our game. I think I grew up with mostly Canadian players. There was a small quota of Europeans, Americans, and things like that. And I understand I got to get over myself and accept the way it is. But that's just how it was at that point in time. And so Montreal, I think at that time, went out and got a whole bunch, started bringing in a bunch of Russian players and things. And for whatever reason, I just had enough. That was it. This is not the Montreal Canadiens that I grew up with. Tremblay was in charge. He was the one kind of part of how him and Uhl getting rid of Waugh, the whole 9 yards. That was still kind of, still a bit of a bitter pill that I hadn't completely swallowed. And so I just thought, you know what? Time for a change. And so because I'd always been a Red Sox fan, Patriots fan, Celtics fan, at that time the Bruins were very bad. They were like, I think 2 or 3 years in a row, they finished last place. And I thought, man, do I dare take up for the Boston Bruins? Little side note to that story, the first jersey I ever had as a kid was a number 4 Boston Bruin jersey, because my dad was a Bruins fan. Grandfather was a Leafs fan. So you would have thought, that should have carried on as I got older. Nope. I become a Montreal fan. So I thought, if you're going to go for a team, you can't go for one that's contending, jumping on the back, because that really looks bad. So that's when I made the decision to be a Bruins fan. Shortly thereafter, they get Chara. They make the trade of Kessel. They get the number 1 pick. They get Rask. We end up with Sagan and all that stuff. And I think 5 years later, they win their first Stanley Cup since 1970 in 2011. So, Michael, that's kind of how the story unfolded. To this day, my former Habs fan buddies still hold it against me. Still can't believe I ever did that. But that's the story, Michael. Told you I'd get it out at some point in time, and I thought this is an appropriate time with one of my former Hab buddies. So, Mac.
And just know, Michael, we did have some medical testing done, and Duke is okay. The stories are true, and he is okay. And because we as Habs fans are so welcoming, when he does see the light and decide to come back in his twilight years, we'll be happy to have him back with us.
Well, you never know. But the good thing, Mac, that you'll enjoy about it is that as I went along as a Habs fan in those later years, I made sure my son was a Habs fan. And he, to this day, is a diehard Habs fan. Him and I have many battles about it. Gallagher is his favorite player. He's got the jersey and everything. And actually, I had a real good father-son moment here 3 years ago. Got him tickets to the Habs Oilers game, and we sat in the end where Montreal where Price was for 2 periods, and we were kind of just off to the corner up in the 200s looking down, and that was quite a thrill. I'll tell you, he's good. Price is as fundamentally sound a goaltender as I probably have ever seen, and stuff.
Yeah.
So little bit of a ray of light there for you, just if in anything, in my son. So that's the story, Michael. You have it all. All right, Mac, we're going to conclude with the fact that if the playoffs were to start today, and I'm sure you are aware that right now, of the 7 teams that are in our country, 6 of them would hold down a playoff spot if we started the playoffs today. So I want to ask you, what Canadian team do you find is surprising you the most? Maybe you got 1 or 2 or 3. What do you got to say on that one?
The homer in me isn't surprised by the Habs only because they were close last year with a historically bad power play.
Yep.
So I'm the progression and continuation I see there is good. The Leafs needed to be good. The Oilers are the one and that I'm happy for because my God, that franchise has such strong history and it's almost been impossible how with all their draft picks they haven't been able to put it together, and it, knock on wood, seems like the right coach for the team is in there now. Draisaitl and McDavid are phenomenal. Even with Adam Larson on the shelf, their defense seems average to good, which is all they've needed. And they're getting consistent goaltending. So to me, that would be the team that the Canadian team that surprised me the most.
Right. I would tend to agree, although I think I'm going to give a slight more edge to the Canucks. I think a lot of people did think the Canucks were going to improve this year, but they're improving, but they're looking real good at improving. They're getting great goaltending. When Markstrom's not in there, what's the kid's name? Bartow or something like that. I think he's played like 6 games. He's got the highest save percentage or second highest save percentage in the league or something I saw. The kid Erickson, who really impressed me last year when I watched the interview that he did on Hockey Night in Canada, was and it's not often I get impressed by interviews and things, but man, he's definitely going to be one of the faces of the NHL moving forward. They're looking really good. The Oilers, for the sake of the NHL, when you don't have your best player in the playoffs on a fairly consistent basis, that's not a good thing. And so it's good to see him, McDavid, having a great year. I live here in the Edmonton area. Not that I root for them, but I mean, they're in the West, so I kind of follow, hope they do well. If the Bruins didn't make it and Edmonton keeps going, obviously. Because I'll tell you, it's when you live in a hockey city, and you're not that far from Toronto, and we all know how fan base in Toronto or in these cities, they're very passionate because they're closer to the team and things. Here in the 1 year here, 2 years ago, 3 years ago, when they went to the semifinals or something, they played against Anaheim and lost out there. This place was it was amazing. It was impressive to be here. Like, I live in one of the suburbs of Edmonton, Spruce Grove. We're like maybe 30 minutes from Rogers Place and stuff. And it's an unbelievable atmosphere that this city has when the Oilers are doing well. But they've just made a whole bunch of bad decisions in terms of, coaching decisions. And then Chiarelli obviously really has put them in a bit of a bind and things. But, I think Ken Holland's doing some nice things with what he has to work with at the moment. One of those has been, getting Tippett as a coach. I mean, I don't know if you ever heard Dave Tippett talk, but I've listened to him do they do interviews with him on TSN 1260 here in Edmonton. And man, I'm thinking, if that guy walks into the locker room on day one and I'm in there and I'm like, whatever you want, sir, I'm going to do it. He's got one of them commanding, strong voices sort of thing. And story I read the other day is that, and not that I'm a big, genius where it comes to, the technicalities of the game, but they were talking about how Edmonton is starting to utilize the breakout. Normally, breakouts you want to keep along the boards and all this kind of thing. They are starting to do a lot of breakouts up the middle, which kind of goes against old school principles of that, and is actually something that that I think they're saying they want to keep implementing into their system, make it part of the culture of how they're going to do things. And that. So things are definitely looking up here in Edmonton. They're getting good goaltending. I know you and we've had this discussion a few times about the whole needing two goaltenders this day. And it does seem like teams who are taking that option, not to say you can't win in your case, like with Price carrying the boatload of the work. But Edmonton is kind of right there with Boston in how their goaltending is really, complementing each other and things like that. So it's looking good here in Edmonton. Happy for the Edmonton people here. Is Winnipeg surprising you a bit with the fact? I mean, look at that team. They're down Myers. They got rid of Trouba. Well, they got rid of Myers as well. And Bufflin still isn't back. Nobody has a clue when he's going to be back in that. Are you surprised that Winnipeg is holding a playoff spot right at the moment? Or do you think they're that strong up front that they're sustaining what they're doing?
Kind of a bit of both. I mean, part of the problem going into this offseason was what was Winnipeg going to do, because they had all that depth, and how was it going to turn out after? And I think they made the tough decisions. I don't think they were counting on the Bufflin piece. So the fact that they've weathered that storm but the depth up front doesn't hurt. Another, like you talk about Tippett and how he speaks, and you heard the stories from how much the players like him. I think Maurice is similar in Winnipeg. Mm-hmm. I think this is a guy that the players are willing to play hard for, and I think if anything, there must be a huge underdog, nobody believes in us vibe going on in Winnipeg right now. And we know from sports, whether it's your local high school team or the pros, that can work wonders. And I kind of feel that this little NHL city, it's probably feeding off of that right now, and this team is saying, yeah, we've lost a lot, but we're still here, and mm-hmm. So far so good.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. And then, of course, Calgary's kind of come back to the pack from what they did last year, much like with Tampa Bay, who does seem to be finding their game now. So this whole jumping way out in front of everybody, I don't know. It's funny how sports work. I mean, there's Tampa Bay last year, odds-on favorite to win the whole thing, even when having the regular season they had. But when it come playoff, nobody was really finding a good enough reason to say they're going to get knocked off. And out of the blue, they get swept by Columbus. So, I mean, you just never know. Maybe it's good that teams do kind of take the long marathon type route to get there. Toronto, another one of those teams when we've talked about the cap and things like that, who have made the decision to invest a big chunk of their cap into 4 players. Still holding their own. It's got Tavares coming back. I think he's playing Wednesday night on the island when they go back there again. So Canadian teams are looking good. So if you're a Canadian hockey fan outside of the nation's capital, and even with Ottawa, I don't think. I mean, they're doing what we all thought, but I think they're playing good, looking bad. Does that make sense?
Makes total sense. And as much as they got ripped for the trade with the Avalanche that allowed the Avalanche to kind of have the better of them, if the Sharks continue to stumble, some of the the DeMello, this journeyman defenseman that they picked up, is proving to be a serviceable 4, 5, 6 defenseman. They're where they need to be with maybe a younger, less experienced version of a Maurice and Tippett in the former Leafs assistant. As much as their owner is brutal and they could have arena downtown that would help. I think they're like you said, a good bad team. I mean, they've had a couple surprising wins, and young players are getting their opportunity. Their farm team now is in Belleville, which is the smallest AHL city of all of them. It's half an hour from me. It's 50,000 people, and I've gone to a game or two each year. And their farm team plays hard. They've got a good coach down there as well. So I think there's hope long term. I just management owner makes you really worried about the Senators, but
Right on.
has to be up.
Right on. Well, things are going well for 6 of the 7 cities in terms of looking for playoff spots. So here's hoping we can get at least 4 of them in there, 4 or 5, because we all know that when we have a bunch of Canadian teams in the playoffs, it makes it interesting for everybody in the country, and especially when you can get Montreal and Toronto in there, Calgary, Calgary, Edmonton. Those rivalries are big ones. And so here's hoping that things continue to work out for our Canadian teams. So Mac, thanks so much for staying on extra, doing the hockey coverage. I know some of our hockey guys will appreciate this segment. And Blazy's a big football guy. He brings a lot to the table when it comes to football. But I give up on Blazy because every time he's in here, he always gives us good stuff. But he's got his time of the year for it. Once the Super Bowl's over, then I expect him to have his A game where hockey's concerned.
Well, I feel like I'm talking almost directly to Michael Link and a couple of others when I'm out here. So hopefully he's feeling good.
Yeah.
I'm going to put my miner's headlamp on and go out and finishing my shoveling that I didn't get to. So thanks, Duke.
All right.
Good night, everybody.
Take care, man. Have a good one and drive safe tomorrow.
Will do.
Nope. And Mac is gone. So hopefully everybody's enjoyed the first parts of our program, NFL week number 10. Really appreciate these guys, Mac coming on, doing the hockey edition. I know that's part of our show that we've, been wanting to step up a bit more and things like that. So we'll continue to work on that. If you're watching for the first time, don't be afraid to come to our Sunday night Sports Guys Facebook page. I'll put a link in the comment section later. I do see that comments are not available for just friends mode. So we're still kind of experimenting with a lot of these things. We used the software called Ecamm to be able to bring the production to you the way that we're doing it. When we do it via YouTube, there is that opportunity for people to pose questions during the course of the show. I think last week from a Facebook page, which we did it, our Sunday Night Sports Guys page, we were able to have people pose questions. It does not seem like through my profile that we're able to do that. So we're trying to get our product out there, get our brand out there, get as many people to see what we do here. I think these guys do a bang-up job every week, giving insight into sports, and that's really all we are, is 3 guys who really love sports. We pretty much grew up together, always on sports yarns, playing sports and stuff like that. So it's really great getting together with these guys every week doing this. At this point in time, I want to talk on obviously the biggest story going today here in Canada, and that is the firing of Don Cherry. Now, before I get into that, I want to kind of qualify myself with this upcoming commentary and let you know that in no shape, way, or form that the opinions and views that I share here with you during the course of this in any way are what Troy Blades and Troy McKenzie feel. They have their own thoughts, I'm sure, on it. So please don't come away thinking that this is a Sunday Night Sports Guys, what they all think, because it isn't. This is just my view, my take on the whole thing, and I thought it was important to make that known right off the bat. So as we know from Saturday night's Coach's Corner, Don Cherry has made some comments that has not gone well with a lot of people in this country. And as a result of that, a lot of outrage came out about what he said. And as of yesterday, he was relieved of his services of Coach's Corner with Sportsnet, a company of Rogers. First off, allow me to say that, as I have mentioned in my hockey talk with Mac, that I'm a disciple of Don Cherry. I'm a fan of Don Cherry. Don is pretty much a, take him or leave him, right? You either love him or you hate him. There's not much gray area where Don Cherry is. One thing I think we can all agree upon is that this is a man devout to his country. He is a Canadian patriot to the hilt. And, one of the real big things that he's passionate about, in addition to hockey itself, is the men and women who serve in our military, those who have fought in those world wars. And that Don's 85 years old. He has a connection back to, to that past and things. So he the way he handles himself, it's no secret. It's not something that people should be utterly surprised about. It's been pretty much the same. Sportsnet knew what they were getting when they hired him, right? Nothing's ever changed there. I like to think of this story as a story of consequences. And I say that from this point of view. One of the things we need to establish, and everybody needs to kind of understand, is that Sportsnet Rogers is a company. It is a business entity. And like any business entity, they do reserve the right to hire and fire people, right? They also are a brand. They are a product. And like anybody who has a brand or puts a product out there, there are certain things that they want to meet. There's criteria that they want to meet. They want their brand or their product to be known in a certain light. Now, the question becomes, what Cherry had to say, did it warrant him being fired? All right. Actually, it does not really matter what you and I think. To them, Sportsnet, Rogers, even to the NHL itself, they all came to the conclusion that they no longer wanted him associated with their brand and product. So saying this, Don knew there would be consequences. He's had several run-ins there. There's been many documented. You can Google stuff where Don has gone, had run-ins with CBC, even with Rogers and stuff like that. But again, these guys knew what they were getting when they hired him, right? No surprises here. And personally, my opinion of it, I really do not feel what he said was worthy to be taken that far out of range. I just don't. That's my opinion. I'm very much like Don and himself. I'll tell you what I think. I call it as I see it. You agree, you disagree. And if you disagree, I'll respect your decision, right? But I think this went way beyond. The story goes beyond more than just Don Cherry getting fired. This is a continuation of an assault on freedom of speech in this country. The thing I think pisses me off the most with regards to this, even though I acknowledge that Rogers has the right to fire him, again, as I said, their brand, he said something that they didn't agree with. A bunch of people, I'm guessing more so in the Toronto area, just speculating, got on the phone, inundated with calls, blah, blah, blah. They didn't like it, right? So they have that right to do it. But freedom of speech, and ironically, the day that he gets fired is on a day that we as a country, and here's the other thing, and I don't really even think this had, I know I've been reading some things about immigrants really getting, I'm hoping that that's not true, because let me tell you something. I don't think this isn't the immigrants causing any of this, right? I think more has to do, and this kind of takes me, and I don't want to get too far off on a tangent. I can do a go live someday just here on my page and just how I feel about certain things. But I work at Costco. I've been there for 4 months. And living here in the Edmonton area is the most I have ever been exposed to the diversity of our country. Coming from Southwest Nova Scotia, there's not a lot of diversity back there. We do have pockets of the Black community that are in Southwest Nova Scotia, but we do not have the ethnicity or the diversity of culture that you have in cities, whether it be Montreal, even in smaller places like St. John, Halifax, St. John's, Newfoundland, Winnipeg, things like that. Edmonton, a city of close to 1 million people, is very diverse, all right? And it's been a pleasure and just awesome pleasure to be working at Costco. I've met people, been working alongside people, different cultures, Polish, Africans, Muslims, nice people, very good people, not had a bad experience the whole time there. Ukrainians, French, you name it, people from El Salvador, Ecuador. I mean, it's many United Nations in a sense. And working there, and here's another thing. I mean, I've been out here for 7 years, and I would never want to come off as not being sensitive to anybody who's experienced racism, because that has to be a terrible experience. I have not had that happen to me. I've not had anybody of another color or anything say anything to me. So I don't understand that. I don't. And I would never make light of it. But I'm telling you something. I've been out here for 7 years in January, and I have never yet to see anything remotely close to a racial slur, a racial action, if you know what I mean. I've just seen people really get along well in this culturally diverse city. People holding the door for each other, people saying please, thank you, excuse me, and things like that. I just have not seen it. And so when you hear talk about different things, it's like, man, what's going on in these other places? Because it seems like, things are really good here, unless I'm that sheltered. And so it takes you to, to me, I really don't know if this is about immigrants. I really don't. His particular, what he said, you people. And I see today that he did make a bit of an apology, an acknowledgement that he could have probably said it differently, like everybody and things like that. But I don't think what he said there warrants the reaction that it is getting today, right? But here's the thing about consequences. I'm pretty sure Don knew once after having some of the other run-ins and some of the conversations that went along with that he was always going to be walking a fine line, that he was going to be constantly watched and monitored every show to see what was going to happen, right? And so anyway, he still says that he didn't think what he said was terrible, okay? His opinion, and he's not recanting it, okay? So you know what? He's standing up for what he believes in. He said what he said, and he doesn't feel it. He really that should have been taken as being slighted, and he's holding his ground on that. Here's the thing about the consequences. He lost his job because of it. All right. Consequences will also play into the part with Sportsnet, that who has fired him. Because if you're like me, if you've read a lot of the different social media platforms, the Twitter, Facebook feeds, whatever the case might be, YouTube, all of this, I don't think Sportsnet was expecting what's came at them in the last 24 to 36 hours. It has been pretty intense. And one thing here in Canada, if you want to really stir the hornet's nest, dig in on our national pastime, hockey. That is almost like you can touch anything else in the country. You can slam politicians, whatever. But when you touch anything associated with the game of hockey, there is going to be backlash. And so the consequences, Sportsnet has made its decision. They decided that not having Cherry would be better for their brand, better for their product. So now they're presenting their brand. They're going to be presenting their product differently than what people have been buying it for. And I think they're going to find for a while that they're going to suffer some loss. They are going to suffer some financial loss, because I've read everything from people who have, they discontinued their Sportsnet subscriptions. They've gotten Sportsnet taken off of their cable and things like that. So they're going to feel it for a while from that point of view. Here's the thing: sports fans are very forgiving people. They really are, especially people who are extremely passionate about hockey in this country, and they will stay upset about this for quite some time, right? But ultimately, I think you're going to find people will begin to gradually come back. And this is where corporations know these things. They know this. Governments know this when they make decisions, right? We are still kind of reeling and dealing with the backlash of the result of the federal election that many people here in the West are not happy about, and has brought the conversation of separation to it. And I add that this whole thing with Cherry has really intensified those talks out here as well, right? It just seems like there's little things continue to go. I mean, let's face it, our country is in, man, it's in hard shape. We are in hard shape. And here yesterday, that was the real pisser for me, was, with Sportsnet, why could you have waited till today? Right? We all know that Remembrance Day holds a real big significance to majority of Canadians, right? Regardless of what went on Saturday night, yesterday was about our fallen and the ones who currently are serving and things like that. I don't know about you, but I make a point to try to get to a service every year. If I'm not working, I go to a service. I was to the one again yesterday in Spruce Grove. Pretty cold day. Attendance down a little bit from the year before, but still pretty good. And you know what? I still come away, getting goosebumps when I'm at one of them services, and they come in and they start playing the bagpipes and the drum roll and all that thing, and you watch the people who are coming in, more so ones now who represent, people of families representing those who were lost in the world wars. You see people coming in who are currently serving and stuff like that. And, I'm not ashamed to admit, I still get a tear in my eye when I'm at a service like that, just in awe and gratitude for what, has been done for me and things like that. And, that's kind of the thing with Cherry, I think got overlooked, right? That man, it's the old saying that, you can do 10 things right, but on the 11th time, if you do something, that ruffles feathers, all the other 10 are going to be forgotten, right? And I think that's happening a bit here in Cherry's situation. So yeah, it would have been better to see, or I would have preferred just for Sportsnet to have waited till today. I think that would have been more classy, a thing to do. And I think they might have found a little bit less, backlash coming at them had they waited a day. To me, I don't think that was a classy move whatsoever. Ron MacLean, very, very disappointed in him at how he handled the whole scenario, right? To sit and say you didn't see it coming. You did see it coming, Ron. You sat right there. You what do you say? We love you for it. Thumbs up. All of this kind of thing. It's not like you didn't know. And you've been with this man forever and a day, right? Cherry has been instrumental in helping you to hold your position, bringing you back on broadcast and things like that. Very disappointed. Very disappointed. Ron MacLean is one of the best at what he does. One of those guys that, to me, he's like the Joe Buck of hockey and setting the stage for hockey night in Canada on a Saturday night on a regular season in November. Ron MacLean can get you all jacked up for a game. That aside, as good as he was, to me, also seeing the backlash that he's endured on his Twitter feed, on his Facebook page, is amazing. You would have never thought that guy would have gotten what he got, but he's getting hit. He's getting hammered really good. And, he's a guy that goes out, he does his hockey show, I forget what it's called, Hockey Canada, or he goes out, he's all over the country, him and a few others, bringing broadcast on Sundays and things like this. They do hockey day in Canada, all that kind of stuff. I think he's going to find this to be a very rough year from here on out. And I would not be surprised if at some point here within the next maybe month, wouldn't shock me if Ron MacLean steps away as well. I think the pressure on him is going to be that intense. Cherry is to some people a national treasure. He's an icon. A lot of guys, a lot of people love him. A lot of people love him, especially people of so-called conservative values and things like that. He speaks their language, right? And I think if you followed any of these social media sites at all, if you get through the nastiness of some of it that's gone on, you'll see, the love and affection that people have for this man. And so they take it personally, right? That, and along with the fact of free speech. What is free speech? What is it? Can somebody define free speech for me? Because it certainly has changed. I'm 52, and I'm telling you, I've seen some difference in speech over the years, right? And so, everybody has their take. Everybody has their opinion on this whole thing. It definitely has not done anything to narrow the gap of things that we need to have happen in this country. It just didn't. If anything, it's added to the flames and stuff, and that's a real shame, because Canada has always been recognized as a bastion of hope in the world, a place where many people have wanted to get to, probably more so than the United States for a lot of them. Our reputation has gotten to that point. But now it is sad to watch what's going on in this country, and it makes you wonder. And I mean, you cannot look at me and say that you don't see the division and all these things that are happening. And it is a real shame. I sat there yesterday during the course of the service and just thinking, who knows what goes on the other side of death. But let's just say people have an idea of what's happening back here. Can you imagine what they must be thinking? What they fought for, what they gave their lives for, to see their country in the state that it is now. It's really sad. It truly is. And you know what? Hopefully something can happen to change things. I am not optimistic about it at this point in time, but I've been wrong many times before. I hope I'm wrong on this one. But boy, man, oh man. So anyway, won't go off on too much more. Just kind of wanted to chime in on that. Again, as I said, these are my personal opinions, my personal thoughts on this. Please do not take this of anybody else, especially, my fellow panelists on the show, Troy and Troy. I don't expect them to have anything to say. They don't have to, right? But just don't think that what I'm saying is something that represents them, because it isn't. So anyway, thank you so very much. If you've stayed through the whole thing, we really appreciate your support. Like I said, I think these guys do a bang-up job. They are worth coming to see every week. So we will be back next Tuesday at 5 p.m. Mountain Time with another edition of the Sunday Night Sports Guys. Hope everybody has yourself a great night. Take care rest of the week. Make lots of friends. Make lots of memories. Family and friends. So take care. Have a good one, guys. See you soon.